In this project, we'll create a variable that has a changing value based on a button press. Then we'll use that variable's value to decide whether an LED light is on or off. Above the void setup function, we'll create our variable. First, we have to decide what type of variable we're going to use. This is an integer variable, shortened to int, and that means the variable can only have whole number values, no decimal places. Next, we name the variable. I'm naming it press count because that's what this variable is going to track for us, how many times the button has been pressed. You'll notice that I'm putting a capital C for the new word in my variable. You can't have spaces in a variable name, so using this capitalization, which is called camel case, makes it more easy to read when you have a variable that has two words in the name. Next, we'll use an equal sign to set the variable equal to its starting value. So we have an integer named press count with a starting value of 0. Within the void setup function, use a pin mode function with the arguments to and output to set up an LED plugged into port 2. Use another pin mode function with the arguments 6 and input pull up to set up a button on port 6. Within the void loop function, the first thing we see is an if statement. The if statement has two key parts. Between the parentheses of the if statement is a condition. Between the curly braces of the if statement are actions that run when the condition is true. Here the condition checks the button on port 6, and it's saying, is the reading from port 6 equal to low? And notice that when we're checking to see if two things are equal, we use two equal signs. So if the button is pressed and a low signal is coming into port 6, then the code between the curly braces is going to run. The first line inside the if statement's actions is press count plus plus. This adds 1 to the value of the variable press count. So this is a shorthand way of saying press count equals press count plus 1. Using plus plus does exactly the same thing. It says whatever press count was when we reached this line of code, add 1 to that. The next line of code is a delay function with an argument of 250. That's 250 milliseconds or 1/4 of a second. If you've done some of the past projects, you remember that an if statement can be checked hundreds or thousands of times a second. So we want this delay after press count increases to give you time to remove your finger from the button so that one button press doesn't increase press count multiple times. So that delay of 250 milliseconds pauses the program long enough for you to release your finger from the button. The code then reaches the end of this first if statement. Next, it finds another if statement. The condition of this if statement is checking the value of the press count variable. If the press count variable is equal to 1, then we want to digital write port 2 high. In the first if statement, we've changed the value of press count if the button is pressed. In the second if statement, we're checking that value and saying if it's equal to 1, turn on the LED. The else statement here is only going to run when the condition of the if statement above it is false. So if press count is not equal to 1, the code is going to skip the actions of that if statement and jump to the else statement and run those actions. The actions inside this else statement are to digital write port 2 low, turning off the LED. This next line takes the press count variable and sets it equal to 0. This is a little bit tricky as you start using the variables and you're setting them equal and then checking their value. Remember, when you're setting a value for a variable, use one equal sign. When you're checking the value of a variable, use two equal signs. So the code will run either the actions in this if statement, turning the LED on, or it will run the actions in this else statement, turning the LED off. Then the program will reach the closing curly brace of the void loop, jump back up to line 13, and check the digital read of port 6 again. So let's run through how this would work if you plugged in your MakerBoard and uploaded this program. We set press count equal to 0 at first, so as long as you don't press the button, the if statement condition on line 13 is false. The code skips those actions. It checks is press count equal to 1. That's false, so it skips that if statement and it runs the else statement, turning off the LED and setting press count to 0 again. So you wouldn't see anything happen in this loop because all you're doing is turning off an LED that's already off and resetting a variable value that's already 0. Now when you press the button, the digital read of 6 is going to equal low, so this condition is true. Now, the code inside the curly braces of the if statement runs, and press count is now equal to 1. After a delay of 250 milliseconds, the code is going to drop down to line 18 and check this condition. Is press count equal to 1? It is, so the code inside the second if statement will run, turning on the LED, and the else statement will be skipped over. The code will reach the bottom of the void loop, jump back up, and check the if statement again. Imagine that you had pressed the button a second time. So, the digital read of 6 is low, the condition is true, so press count plus plus means that press count now equals 2. There's a delay of 250 milliseconds, so you can release your finger from the button. Then the code drops down to line 18 and says, is press count equal to 1? It's not, because press count is now equal to 2. That means the code inside the curly braces of this if statement is skipped, and the else statement will run. The else statement is going to turn off port 2, turning off the LED, and it's going to reset press count to 0. Then the void loop will end, code jumps back up and checks the digital read again. So throughout this void loop, there are 3 possible values that the press count variable can have: 0, 1, or 2. When the press count variable's value is 2, it's immediately going to fall to the else statement and get reset to 0. So it won't have a value of 2 for very long, and the value of 2 doesn't do anything to the LED. What we've created in this program is an easy way to use a single button as an on-off switch, toggling back and forth between something being on and off.